Hey, YouTube, this is Cynthia again with Healing Holden. And sorry, it's been so long. I've been meaning to do this video for a while because I haven't really discussed the Feingold diet and some of the things that Holden and I both were able to use among the other items that, food items and chemicals and things like that, that we were able to eliminate that were causing issues. Salicylates and phenols were and synthetic food dyes um, and fragrances, and I think I discussed the fragrances and chemicals in the bathroom video, but I hadn't ever. I don't think I've discussed with you guys the salicylate one. So here we go. Uh, I want to talk about the Feingold diet because it's something that you guys can look up for yourself online. So it's feingold.org. And what it does is remove artificial or synthetic food dyes, flavorings and fragrances, BHA, BHT, and TBHQ. Look them up. I'm not even going to start. And artificial sweeteners. So you want to go as natural as you can because the body doesn't do real well with all these artificial chemicals. So the first things that you should know about are the salicylates and the phenols. So these occur naturally in lots of foods that normally you do fine with, or most people do. So it's salicylates are in things like aspirin, which is from willow bark. So it's a naturally occurring chemical, but it's in there. And I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that the reason that people are having a lot of difficulty with this is because what's the first thing they do when you get a vaccine and you get a fever or whatever, they tell you to take aspirin or Tylenol. So I suspect that maybe it's because of that's being introduced into the body right after an assault, and your immune system is like already, hyperstimulated and recognizes these things first. And I think that's where like food allergies are coming from, and maybe even the chemical sensitivities and things like that, that maybe it's your body right after the vaccine have encountered these things when they're hyper revved up. And so after that, when everything's kind of cooled down, it recognizes these things when they come into your environment again, and they start to mount a defense. This is just, my hypothesis. I haven't tested this out. I don't know, but if you want to know where, or if you ask yourself where this is coming from and why this is happening, I suspect that this is the reason. I haven't done any labs. I'm speculating on this one, guys. I try not to speculate wildly, but it does seem like somewhat of an educated guess, or at least a relatively, I don't know what you want to call it, but for sure it's a guess. Anyway, so salicylates are in a lot of different fruits and vegetables. And so things like cucumbers and grapes and red peppers, all the peppers, what else? Tomatoes, and so on. I mean, if you look up the Feingold diet, they'll give you a list of the foods that they're in. And then phenols are in things like peaches. I'm trying to remember the other things that phenols are in, but that's the only one that I can really recall. And it's interesting, my sister was so allergic to peaches and she's not anymore, but it was to the point where she couldn't even be in a room with peaches without, blowing up. Her face would get swollen, and her throat would start to close, and they had to get out of there. So it's really amazing how much it can affect you. But I wanted to let you know kind of our experience with this and what made me, what we did to kind of help eliminate that when we saw some issues. I mean, with this, because we did all these food tests, we've done the food sensitivity tests. And the only thing with Holden that has salicylates in him that we did definitely see in the food sensitivity test was red grapes and raisins. I don't think there wasn't really anything else. And then we did chemical sensitivity. So he had some of those, but it wasn't anything that had salicylates or phenols. So this is kind of an in addition to the sensitivities test that you might take. You may want to watch out for these things because sometimes they just don't show up on the labs. But if you notice something, then you can always kind of back off. Let me tell you the story. So what I've done is I've just, for me, because of this, and I have ADHD and became or acquired it after my vaccines when I was 3. They didn't tell me this. When I was looking at Holden's labs, I started looking at my own medical records, and I knew that I had had seizures ever since I was about 3. And then I looked at the timing of when I got him and when I ended up with ADHD. And it was like about that age, right after my 3-year-old shots. And they coincided. I don't have any labs on myself. All I have are the medical records. So this is in Holden's case, I've got proof. In my case, based on his records and what I know can happen, I'm postulating. But anyway, also knowing that you can get seizures from vaccines, it's in the inserts. And coincidentally, I did after mine. I mean, literally, my sisters were older than me by 10 to 14 years, and they were taught how to stick a wooden spoon in my mouth if I had a seizure and lay me down on the floor. And up until I was 18, I had one when I was 18. And, I didn't know what had happened. I just kind of collapsed and in front of my mother and don't have a recollection of anything, just kind of woke up on the floor. So anyway, not cool. But anyway, and that causes brain damage. I mean, that's nothing to sniff at. You don't just go, oh, well, there are seizures and just move along and accept it. I mean, this kills brain cells. Now you know what's wrong with me, right? Among other things. Anyway, so let me tell you what happened when I first started thinking about the Feingold diet with Holden. I started reading up on it, and it just happened to be, and I really feel like this is God sometimes, just giving you a circumstance where, something, it's almost a blessing in disguise what happened, because you really understand, like, oh, this is, it brings something sharply into focus, some kind of faux pas. Anyway, so basically, I decided I'm going to do the Feingold diet for Holden right after I just went to the store and bought like eggplants, eggplant, cucumbers, tomatoes, what else? Peppers, grapes, like all this stuff that had like exclusively full of salicylates. So I was like, oh, okay, I better not give them to Holden. So I'll eat them. So I go to work one week, and all week long, I'm eating all these foods for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and not giving them to Holden to see how he does. Well, by the time Friday rolls around, I'm just like, from Monday to Friday, just increasing in my frustration at work and my irritability, and like for no real reason. At the time, I had a job I really enjoyed, and things were going well, in the job. Things were, bad at home because of Holden, but things were fine. I even realized, I'm like, why am I getting upset? And things weren't going poorly at home with the exception of Holden. Like, my ex and I were finally on the same page, largely because we had a habit of, like, when the chips were down, it's almost like you have to like work together. Okay, we're just going to set our differences aside and like carry on and try to be cool. At any rate, by the end of the week, Friday rolls around and I come home. No one's at home. I come home. I don't remember why, but no one was at home. And I come home and I am furious. I'm just like, and my nerves are just fried and frazzled. And I walk in the house, and I had to walk in through kind of a little laundry room. nothing was off, nothing. The day had been fine, nothing was wrong. And I'm just so irate. And I have my keys in my hand and I'm just like, finally, I let it all go and I like throw the keys against the wall in the laundry room. And, they kind of jangle and fall to the floor. And I'm like, why am I so mad? I'm mad for no reason. It wasn't my time of the month. There was like nothing was going on. I should have been fine. And then it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh, it's the salicylates. I've been eating nothing but salicylate foods. And when you look at the testimonials on that site for feingold.org, it's really amazing because each child has its child, and then there's like some, not adults, but like young adults that have different stories. There's one kid that had migraines forever, and with adjusting this in his diet, it finally went away. So I was like immediately like, oh my God, I just did it to myself. I have a problem with salicylates. And so I decided to kind of scale back on those and just kind of keep a weather eye on them, because I realized I just kind of I got so much in my body. I could kind of feel it building over the whole week that I had been eating nothing but that stuff. So that was kind of a fail fast forward lesson for me. The other thing that happened was, well, and the other thing that's, you don't eat on the Feingold diet is the food dyes. So the artificial ones, like you can do saffron, if you want orange or yellow. I think there's like cabbage gives you a blue. Anyway, there's a lot of natural ones, beets, raspberries, stuff like that. Those are one thing. I'm sure red skin grapes will give you a dye, but that has salicylates. Anyway, so it's kind of depends on you, right? You might be okay with salicylates, but not phenols, or vice versa. Like I think maybe my sister had an issue with phenols, and that's why she had the peach problem. But anyway, I don't know. I'm speculating. But that's what the literature says when you go into the Feingold diet. It's not all of the, because then you wouldn't eat anything. But there's certain, ones that bother you. And in some cases, it's just a matter of, like I noticed for me, if I just eat a little bit of the food with salicylates, it doesn't cause a problem. But if I, have a lot of it, then I will have a problem. So that was helpful to kind of change, because with ADHD you have ADHD rages. I used to get so mad and I didn't know why, and I would just like this situation, and now it kind of answered that for me. So now I'm like, okay, great, I can like control that with food. I was, there's a lot of things that food can cause, and another one, I ate buckwheat. I put buckwheat in a bread, and I think this is in one of my videos. And the buckwheat caused me to have panic attacks. And I was going through my divorce, so I thought it was the divorce, but then I noticed that it started right after I would eat this bread for breakfast. I would have this like bread that was homemade and gluten-free, supposedly. But buckwheat is a grain, technically, that has its own gluten in it too. So could be the gluten in it. I have no idea. But I did look up, buckwheat and panic attacks. And I did find one person on a bulletin board somewhere that said that they had panic attacks after eating buckwheat. It's pretty amazing. And, if you think about it, if a peanut can cause someone to die, I mean, why wouldn't some kind of food cause you migraines, irritation, irritability rather, rage, or panic attack? So I eliminated that, and no more panic attacks. Pretty amazing. So ever since I've like lessened the salicylates in my diet, I've been pretty even keeled. Another thing that I had with ADHD, and this was something that I had already eliminated out of my diet and Holden's. When we first started, I cleaned everything up of any kind of dyes, but my mother had given me this seaweed. And I may have stated this on one of my other videos, but it was this seaweed from Costco. I don't know if you've seen it. It's kind of like wet and a little bit neon green. And I'm not thinking to check the ingredients at that point because it's seaweed. Like, it never dawned on me that they would add something to it. So I'm sitting there eating the seaweed for lunch at work. at my desk trying to read this email. And suddenly I feel this like wash, like almost like a veil come over my brain and my eyes. Like it felt like like it must have been like my blood flow, like whatever I had eaten, whatever was being transported in my blood to my tissues, my brain and my eyes, um, was entering the cells there. And literally, I mean, I could feel it in my brain. I don't know how to describe it, and in my eyes. It's the strangest thing. I mean, why not my muscles or anything else? I don't know why, guys, but all of a sudden, after I felt that, I was reading an email in front of me, and y'all, I could not comprehend what it was saying. Couldn't comprehend it whatsoever. I kind of freaked out a little bit. I was like, I was just fine a minute before, and all of a sudden this happened, and now I can't comprehend what I'm reading. And I'm like, I'm trying to do my job, so I'm stressed. And I print it out, and I start highlighting, and what I'm reading to try and make the points kind of stand out. It was almost like as soon as I read it, it just went in one ear and out the other, and just kind of boop, boop, right out my head. And I could not capture what was happening there. And I'm scribbling notes, trying to like copy, copy some main words, same thing. And I went to a conference room. I scheduled a conference room, and I started reading it out loud to myself, pacing, because I was like, what is happening? For an hour and a half, I did not know what was being said in this email, even though I could read it. And what was interesting is it reminded me of a time when Holden kind of taught himself to read. Like literally, the boy was 3.5, and they call this hyperlexic. And a lot of autistic kids have taught themselves to read like this. I kind of pointed out for Holden when I was teaching him how to read, and I didn't even have to do much. I was like, sound out the words, Holden. He was echolalic, so he couldn't really speak unless you told him a word that he could then echo back to you if that's what he was thinking. So like when he was in pain, we'd ask him, is it your head? Is it your stomach? And he would go, stomach. And like, kind of like when you're trying to recall a word, and unless someone jogs your memory, you can't recall it, or a memory or whatever. So he could read out loud to you, but he couldn't speak on his own. And, with the pictures next to the words in the book, he couldn't, like I would say, okay, so what's happening here in the picture? And he couldn't like put it together. So I thought of that, and I was like, maybe that's what's happening with him, or what had been happening with him, because he couldn't do that either. And that was back when he was still, when his diet hadn't been cleaned of everything. So I was like, okay, what's in the seaweed? Because that was like the only new thing that I had eaten that could have been the culprit. And I turned the package over, and it turns out there's like yellow dye and the number after it. And I looked it up, and y'all, it's like an industrial waste byproduct, like the petroleum industry kind of thing. So I start looking it up, and I start, looking at the Feingold diet and looking at the chemical process and why that happened. And essentially, your body, in order to take the stuff out, in order to take the trash out, requires a sulfur, and a pretty heavy duty load to be able to take the trash out of your body. But it also requires that the sulfur molecules, to be able to carry out a thought, comprehension and thought processing. So your body just basically says, kind of for survival, okay, we're going to take the trash out because this is poison, and you're just not going to think for a little bit while we do that. So that, I think that's what's happening, is that like your chemical processes, apart from the fact that the toxins in your body can cause you to have a lot of irritation, like nervous system irritation, like the toxic mold that Holden has, and from the vaccines too, they would cause him to have the sensory issues, like things are too loud. It's aggravating the nerves. So the tags on his shirt would bother him, or even just the clothes were too scratchy. They had to be like super, super, super soft. And he was just so sensitive to everything. Um, so that's what this kind of made me think of. So these are things that you may want to look at for you or your child. And it could even be something as simple as for migraines. I'm trying to think if there's something else. Oh, so I printed out the stuff on the Feingold Diet that you may want to know about, and it's actually got some really great information on the site. You'll want to kind of take a look at that. So it kind of tells you it's an elimination diet. And then they also have a few things that you can, some questions. They've got all these, FAQs, frequently asked questions that you can go through. How will I know which brands to buy? Because they have like 13,000 brand name products that they've researched and that don't have these things. And so they have a food list and shopping guide for you regarding unwanted additives that may have these. Because, sometimes you have foods that have some kind of name that you have no idea what this thing is, and they've already looked at that chemical or whatever it is to tell you whether or not it's going to be an issue for you if you have issues like this. Who decides if an additive is safe to use? That kind of goes into how they make these decisions. The Feingold handbook to kind of get you into understanding how this works, what foods are culprits, how you kind of determine. I think sometimes too, the food preparation, like if you cook a vegetable or fruit versus when you don't, because that changes the chemical composition of it. My child is taking medication. Can he still use the diet? I haven't delved into this, but you can. Is this diet just for ADHD? I can tell you no. Why are these additives such a problem? So it goes into some of those, the burning questions you may have. Why food dyes are not new. They've been around for more than 100 years. Yes, but. And then where can I find the acceptable brand name products? It says your local supermarket should carry most of the things you will want. Today, there are growing numbers of stores that offer natural products, and hard to find specialty items can be ordered online. This is not a health food diet. Kid-friendly foods are part of the Feingold Diet. So essentially, what else? Can I use the Feingold Diet on my own? I don't know the answer to that. Although what that question, that's a confusing question for me. Can we still eat out at restaurants? So it kind of gives you some tips on eating out. We don't, because there's just so many things that we can't have that we just kind of, even like down to, there's one restaurant I can take hold and do with one thing on the menu. And there used to be another one, but it turned out like the seasoning that they used, something as simple as black pepper, with one of the things at one restaurant, I hadn't thought about the fact that they put salt in the meat and also a little bit of black pepper. Well, he can't eat that. It's on his list of sensitivities. So, and in a lot of, like I noticed a particular dish that I got was like salmon and like organic vegetables, and that's pretty much it. And it was just grilled. But they used some seasoning that had food coloring on it, and I could feel it. So, and I only knew that because I could feel it. And then I asked them, if they put any seasoning on it, and if so, can I take a look at it? And sure enough, it was in the seasoning. And there's even a fast food guide. So again, not something for us, I cook every day. I cook every meal. There are very few items that I get packaged. I think there's like keto cups, like if I want something sweet, there's a few sweets that I will get for him and for me. But pretty much there's nothing else. I don't think there's anything in my pantry or fridge that isn't like a raw, like the raw ingredient, to make something else. Like there's nothing else that's really packaged. I mean, the packaged stuff I have is like shredded coconut. It's like one item, or almond flour. Oh, some other things you need to know about. And this is, I just had a very good friend pass away yesterday, and she had cancer. And she was amazing. Um, she her parents told me about her story. She actually got vaccinated when she was 5. She was about to go to school, and she all of a sudden had like chronic fatigue. She'd come home from school. She's 5. You're supposed to have a lot of energy, run around the house and stuff like that, even after school. And she would just go straight to the couch and lie down on the couch for the rest of the night, have dinner, but that was it. And that was odd to her mom. Well, she goes into a doctor's office because she read this book on yeast, and the guy's name is John Trowbridge, and he checks her out, and she touches his stethoscope with one hand and then touches it again with another. Her mother was describing to me, and he said, "Does she do that often?" And her mom's like, "Yeah, she always has to touch one. If she touches something with one hand, she has to touch it with another." So essentially an OCD issue. And he says, "I think she may have metal poisoning." Turned out she had mercury poisoning, and they chelated her. This was like she was 40. So they chelated her intravenously at that young age. That's really all they had. Now they don't have to do that, but she had mercury, and back then mercury was in all the vaccines. That's probably what I have. And she also had an overgrowth of yeast in her gut that was causing her the fatigue, the chronic fatigue. And so they didn't use any agents to kill it. Her mother just fed her vegetables and yogurt, vegetables dipped in yogurt every day for every meal. And she would literally go to her school and like feed her that. At any rate, I bring her up because there's a lot of other things that you have to be conscious of with respect to diet and where you get your food and how you prepare your food. One of the things that she died of cancer, and what happened was she had arsenic poisoning from rice. They had, so many hurdles that they went over, and she was amazing. I always say she's the one that I called to slap me around if I needed it. She was an incredible artist. I think partially, I look at Van Gogh's paintings and I'm like, she has that amazing use of color and the vibrancy and just things that you would never think to put together. I would love to. She did paintings and she did lots of different types of art, but her use of color was so amazing to me. She would even when you do coloring books, she would print out a black and white, kind of an outline picture of like a photograph or something. And then she would color it in, and just her coloring it in was like spectacular. And I always wondered to myself if that was like not a side effect of the mercury, like whatever, because you never get all that stuff all out. But her mom was like, yeah, she would have been autistic, I think, if we had vaccinated her when she was little, like they wanted us to. But anyway, she got arsenic poisoning apparently from rice, and it's apparently a pretty well-known thing now. I remember a few years ago they were talking about that on the news. There's a way that you can prepare it. Brown rice is has more arsenic than white rice because it's in the hull. It absorbs a lot more, but it's going to be there. So you can parboil your rice and then rinse it afterwards really, really well to try and get out as much as possible. Also, she told me she and her mom were like peeling. If she ever ate almonds, she would take the peel off because there's a lot of arsenic in almonds, and of course apple seeds and stuff like that. But who eats apple seeds? So that's another thing. I hate to feel like you got to watch everything so carefully, but good information. I'm sure she wished I wish she had known about that beforehand, because I'm telling you, she overcame a lot of stuff, and to have this happen now, Just looking forward to seeing her again. At any rate, so rest in peace, my friend. And I hope this helps you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments and I will try to answer you. But that's it right now for Healing Holden. Any updates on Holden? I'm trying to think of, he wants a YouTube channel because his friend has a YouTube channel. So maybe we'll see him. We'll see. I try to protect him as far as like having his face online. You never know what kind of crazies are out there, but that's all I have for you. So signing off and love you. I hope y'all have a really good day. Bye.